It's not the chicken or the egg question, but what comes first, the turkey or an end to the election in California? Plus, got Ozempic? The outgoing food fight the Biden administration is delivering to Trump, and Trump, the border, and tariffs. What Mexico and China are now saying. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
Let me be clear. There is going to be a mass deportation because we just finished a mass illegal immigration crisis on the border.
It's something that formally occurs on January the 20th, but has already begun. Actions, planning, preparation, schematics.
Part prelude, part pep talk. President-elect Trump's incoming border czar and the governor of Texas today speaking to the Texas National Guard and Department of Public Safety members saying they are not waiting until January 20th. The border plan, they say, is already underway. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. He still has 55 days until he reclaims the Oval Office, but Donald Trump already dictating policy, both here at home and abroad. Trump vowing to tag Mexico and Canada with 25% tariffs due to crises at the border, along with 10% additional tariffs for China's role in the flow of fentanyl. Now, Mexico's president vowing retaliation, but it could go well beyond that. Here's just one headline, just one, in the South China Morning Post today. It reads, quote, Donald Trump's tariffs plans turn Chinese investment in Mexico into a waiting game. The border and beyond in focus tonight. Trump's former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, joins me here in a moment. But first to our Robert Sherman, live once again at Trump Transition Headquarters in Palm Beach, Florida. Robert?
Hey there, Blake. That T word, tariffs, we've heard it again and again for the last few months, but now we have an idea of where the president-elect's head is at, in which he's talked about what he'd potentially propose for Mexico, for Canada, and for China. And with that news coming down, the reaction has come down equally, if not more swiftly, from the United States' three most major trade partners. That includes from Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he even spoke with the president-elect by phone shortly after all this came down. Here's how he said that conversation went.
We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is a relationship that we know takes a certain amount of working on, and that's what we'll do.
China's embassy also weighing in on this. They put out a statement saying, quote, China believes that China-U.S. economic and trade cooperation is mutually beneficial in nature. No one will win a trade war or a tariff war. The Chinese Foreign Minister's office also putting the blame for the fentanyl crisis on the U.S. and says they will continue to cooperate in stemming the flow to the United States. But keep in mind, Blake, the president-elect hemmed and hawed for days as to exactly who his Treasury Secretary would be, largely over this issue, tariffs. He ended up going with Scott Bessent, who's publicly supportive of tariffs in a strategic matter. But it does show that there is a broader negotiation that is going to be taking place with the United States' major trade partners. And the first cog has just started to turn. Blake?
Robert Sherman, live in Florida once again. Robert, thank you. All right, so at the corner of Wall and Broad today, the market not panicking at all to this. The Dow, NASDAQ, S&P 500, all up today. The day after Trump vowed new tariffs could be on the way. Now, maybe you've seen some headlines about how tariffs could lead to inflation. After all, someone has to absorb the cost, whether it's sellers, consumers, businesses, a combination of all the above. The Tax Foundation, for example, estimates today that the tariffs that Trump is talking about could generate $1.2 trillion in tax revenue for the next decade. But in the long run, the tariffs, they say, could cost the economy, reducing GDP by about 0.4% and employment by nearly 345,000 jobs. But keep in mind here, Trump levied some $300 billion in new tariffs in his first administration. And what happened? Inflation never got above 2.4% for the calendar year. And even the S&P 500 gained roughly 20% from the time the very first tariffs were placed until the COVID crash occurred. Joining me now, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. Hello, Mick. Here we are again. I guess this is round 2, V2. Here's something I noticed, and let me start here. Trump puts these posts out last night in the 6:30 hour, so we start talking about them at night and into the morning. And then all of a sudden, what do I see today? I see Tom Homan, the border czar, down at the border in Texas with the Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Coincidental?
Yeah, well,
or 1-2 punch?
No, it's not. No, it's not coincidental. What did we say that Trump's priorities were? They were going to be, on the legislative front, it was going to be taxes, then deregulation, and immigration and trade and tariffs. This is putting immigration and the trade and the tariffs debate together. He's going to use the tariffs as a way to try and solve part of the immigration problem, part of the fentanyl problem. He's laid it out during the campaign, so I don't know why anybody's surprised, or if they are, that he's doing this early.
Yep, market kind of blew it off today. So China, Mexico, let's start with China. Cleet Willems, you remember Cleet, he was one of the top folks sitting down across the table from the Chinese during the first go-around. And I asked Cleet, he was on the show, Mick, the other day, about what China learned about the United States and what we learned about them, considering we've got some history here. And here's what Cleet told me he thinks China learned from us, and I'll get your reaction, or what we learned from them. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Let's go back in time, right? When the U.S. first took the $50 billion action against China, the first set of tariffs, China basically told us to take a hike.
Okay.
They didn't engage. They didn't take it seriously.
It was nothing to them.
Correct.
Okay.
But as he continued to ramp it up, all of a sudden they came to the table and they wanted to deal.
So the first $50 billion tranche, and I see you agree with that, China essentially didn't blink. So if that's what happened the first go around, and if you're Donald Trump, should we expect, if this happens, for him to go well beyond that with the first batch into the hundreds of billions of dollars right out the gate?
I think he's going to do whatever he thinks is necessary to get results. Again, China is one thing, Mexico is another. China is got other considerations, including sort of being an international competitor of ours. Mexico is about illegal immigration and drugs. So let's take Mexico as an example. He's going to do whatever it takes with Mexico until they start to help us with immigration and help us on drugs. That's it. I mean, that's what it's going to be.
So on Mexico, before you move on Mexico, one of the fascinating things, Mick, is Donald Trump has dealt with Xi Jinping. He hasn't dealt with Claudia Sheinbaum, the new president there. So what's the message that he's trying to send?
Well, she was in the government before. I think she and Lopez Obrador were relatively close, so she should know that he's serious about that. One of the reasons China sort of didn't respond immediately at the first $50 billion that Cleet Williams mentioned just in your previous section there was that it was the first time dealing with Trump, and they weren't sure that he was serious. Now they know that he is. My guess is she should know that he's serious. There's no reason for this to drag out. There's no reason for Mexico, for example, to put trade at risk so that illegal immigration can continue and fentanyl production can continue. It makes no sense to them. So I think it's the right play by Trump. It's, again, shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, and we'll see what the Chinese and the Mexicans respond with.
Let me leave you with this, Mick. You know this better than I do, but Donald Trump loves seeing that stock market go up and to the right, especially when he's in office. And I'm just sitting back thinking, okay, Trump put this out last night. What did Wall Street do? They blew all this off. Dow, NASDAQ, S&P 500, all up today. There's a variety of reasons, but the bottom line is it was up. And I'm just wondering, Donald Trump, Scott Bessent, they sit there and they see that? They feel maybe even more emboldened, potentially?
No, you use the right word, which is it's a variety of reasons. The stock market is looking at everything Trump, and Trump is tariffs, and he is deportations, but he's also deregulation. He's also a more business-friendly environment when it comes to the federal government. So I think Wall Street is looking their hands over and go, yeah, prices on some things may go up, but we really don't think that's going to contribute much to inflation. But goodness gracious, this deregulatory agenda could really be good for business, be good for fundamentals, and continue to drive the stock market.
Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Mick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Blake.
You got it.
We're not waiting to January. We're already talking. We're already planning. We're going to put a plan in place and secure this nation at the highest level it's ever seen. We're going to finish Trump's work.
All right, so that is the president-elect's border czar, Tom Homan, saying today that his team is already on the move. Homan visiting the border with the Texas Governor Greg Abbott. They visited Eagle Pass, Texas, about 2 hours north of Laredo, which is represented by the Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar, who joins us live here on the Hill. Congressman, thanks for being back with us. Appreciate it. I'm sure you saw a lot of what Tom Homan and Greg Abbott had to say. But as it relates to Tom Homan, you've told me before, Congressman, that you feel like you could work with him. Do you object to anything that he said today?
Well, there's a lot of things we can work on. I want to see some of the details, but certainly, look, we can we can deport people quickly under Title 8. We can do stay in Mexico. We can do so many things on policies that can work right away. In fact, today I was communicating with Tom, and we talked about getting together sometime when I head back to D.C. in the next week or so. So
did he reach out to you?
And I think we can find a lot of common ground.
Did he reach out to you?
I reached out to him, told him that I wanted to sit down with him. And he said, absolutely, we're going to sit down. And he said, next time I'm in D.C., which is next week, I'll see if I can sit down, because there's a lot of things. I've been doing this for many years. Sometimes the current administration has not listened to me. Tom has
hold that thought, because that's where I was going, Congressman. I'm sorry to jump in, but every single time, or close to every single time, I've spoken with you over the last 20 months or so, I've asked you, have you spoken to the Biden administration, because you're a Democrat on the border in Texas, and pretty much every single time you had told me no, which I found fascinating. But shove that to the side for a second. And now you're telling me that Trump's border czar is picking up the phone for you. What does that tell you about possible changes?
That tells me that Tom knows what needs to work, and I can give him my experience. It's interesting. Tom and I are talking to each other. We might not agree on everything, but certainly we can agree to deport quickly the criminals, the national security folks, the 1.3 million final deportation people that have a final deportation order and are still here. Some of the recent crossers are some of the folks we need to look at. So there's a lot of things that I think we can do. And certainly Mexico has done a lot, but they can do much, much, much more, stopping fentanyl and stopping people from coming in.
Congressman, since the election, I've interviewed a lot of Democrats, folks like yourself, who are in tough competitive districts, and you say basically what you just said on immigration. And then Democrats who, when I interview them, it's like the election never existed, and they say the same thing as it relates to immigration. And I see you smiling when I say that, and you're smiling because you know it's true, and you hear it from your colleagues. And so, and now you're laughing, right? Because you know it's true. And so I just wonder if more of your Democratic colleagues are going to talk to Tom Homan and listen to you. And when you say, yeah, I'm talking to Tom Homan, you should too. Oh, that is unfortunate. Congressman Cuellar freezing for us, freezing up there. Yep. Sorry, you're back, Congressman. I don't know if you heard the question, but if you did, basically, if any of your Democratic colleagues, do you think will talk to Tom Homan as well, and should they?
Yeah, I think some of the Democrats should talk to him. I mean, I intend to sit down with him as soon as I get back to D.C., and we should. There's a lot of things we have in common. We might disagree on some things, but I think a lot of things, a lot of policies that I know will work, we ought to be working on together. For example, I told some of the Democrats, you can agree on deporting criminals, right? Some of them hesitated. And I told them that would be a mistake if Democrats cannot even agree to deport criminals.
Let me leave you with this, because Donald Trump is talking about 25% tariffs at the border with Mexico and Canada. You're a border town there. I'm looking at trade between Texas and Mexico. Obviously, Mexico is the number one trade partner with Texas. That's obvious. Exports, Texas to Mexico, $1.3 billion last year. Imports, $142 billion. Those are big, big, big numbers, Congressman. And if a 25% tariff gets put on that could have some real economic consequences. But you want the crisis at the border fixed. So let me leave you with this question. If it means a 25% tariff to potentially fix the border, would you favor that?
Well, let me put it this way. Laredo is the largest port. We handle 40% of all the trade between the U.S. and Mexico. I know this is a way to negotiate, get some leverage. I know that Mexico will come to the table, but nobody wants a 25% tariff on them, and the Mexicans are threatening to do the same thing, and we don't want to get into that. But I think this will definitely get Mexico to the table so we can solve the problem about immigration and fentanyl.
All right, I'll leave it there. Congressman Henry Cuellar, again from the Laredo area border town. Thanks for being with us, Congressman, here on the Hill. Appreciate the time, sir.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
To you as well. Thanks, Congressman. All right, still to come here on the Hill. Live look at the Capitol. It's been 3 weeks since the election, but some House seats still aren't decided. Is that insane or what? Here we are. It's still happening. Scott Traynor, the data science director at DDHQ, breaks down the numbers on the other side of the break. What is taking so long? Plus, can you run the Pentagon like a business, like the finance world would? How Donald Trump could shake up the Defense Department. I'll talk with the ranking member on the House Armed Services Committee. And the battle over Ozempic, what President Biden is trying to do now and how it could set up a clash with the next administration. Hello from Washington, I'm Blake Berman. This is the center of politics. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation, and we're back in 4. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Our country's done some pretty remarkable things in record time. Let me give you a couple examples. 2023, when the I-95 bridge collapsed in Pennsylvania, the city and the state fixed it in just 12 days, less than 2 weeks. Or let's go up into space. The Apollo 13 mission, the crew fixed that damaged command module in 3 days instead of the usual 3 months. But there's California. They can't seem to count the votes fast enough. It is the race that is not yet over. 2 of them, really. Joining me now, data science director at Decision Desk HQ, the man behind the numbers, Scott Traynor. We even put a helicopter on Mars, and we're able to take some pictures. They can't figure this out. And look at it. Look at Scott. Election forecasts try to go beyond the polls. Are they helping? The forecasts like those from Decision Desk HQ, Nate Silver 538, now ubiquitous, but their accuracy is hard to measure. He got the White House first. He got the House first. Scott in the New York Times recently. All right, so let's go to the board here. This is the lay of the land. 220 to 213, Republicans control the House. But I'm going to take you in right now to the state of California. And let's go to CA13, Scott. So here's what I want folks to look at. Couple things here in this race. John Duarte, Adam Gray. It is separated right now by 207 votes out of about 205,000. And this is the number here, about 5,000 votes remaining. Yeah. So let's go one by one here. Separated by 200 votes, what's going on?
What's going on is we don't know. We're not sure who's going to win. There's multiple counties. We're actually going to get some votes in a few hours. They're going to count today. They're going to count tomorrow. They're going to be counting next week. I don't know.
Past Thanksgiving?
They're going to go. Oh, yeah. They're going to be counting well into December. They don't have to certify the race until December 15th. So they've got a little bit of time. Here's the funny thing. The type of votes that are still out favor John Duarte. But Adam Gray, where the votes are going to come from, probably favor Adam Gray. So I really don't know who's going to win this one. If I had to be one candidate or the other, I'd probably want to be John Duarte, but we're a long ways from calling it.
And there's estimated 4,945 votes. I'm going to give you the exact number because they're separated by 207 right now. So how do they get to that number?
Well, it's multiple different counties make up the district, and so this is their estimate on what's left. We call those counties and we get some estimates, but look, we've got to give them a little slack because they're not exactly sure how many are left. They've still got to unballot and unbox a few, and so that number is general.
It's like it's Christmas. They still have to, unbox some things. All right, let me take you to 45, CA 45. That's in Orange County. This is your hometown.
Hometown, yeah.
Okay. Derek Tran, the challenger, Michelle Steele, the incumbent. What's that? That's 581 votes out of about 315,000.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think there's probably a little less than 12,000 votes left. But again, that's another one hard for us to do. Here's the fun stat. Michelle Steele.
You find this fun?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Michelle Steele has not won a ballot drop in 30 ballot drops. So odds say that she's going to win one of these eventually, which is why we still haven't called it yet, because, again, Orange County tends to lean more Republican. But Derek Tran has basically won every single ballot drop. There's going to be ballot drops into the next week. When this one's done, we're going to find that there are a lot of Derek Tran, who's a Democrat, Trump voters, as well as a lot of Michelle Steele Harris voters. It's kind of crazy. This is going to be a study, one we study.
how are we here? Like, how does this happen in California? The race November 5th. What is today? The 26th. So we're 3 weeks out. And you're still saying there's more time to come.
And there's still more time to come. This is how California does it. I know it's surprising to us, but growing up in California, watching these elections, this is how it's done. There's a reason why they don't have to certify it until the 15th. This is just what it is. They take their time. They're very slow. It's what it is. I wish it could be better, but it's just not.
We'll leave it there. Scott Tranter, the man behind the numbers, Data Science Director, DDHQ. We'll do this next week, I guess.
Next week.
We'll see. Thanks, buddy. All right, still much more ahead here on The Hill. Could a finance executive help run the Pentagon? Why it might happen in the next administration. And the current president, 55 days left in office, could be starting a big fight over weight loss drugs. That's when The Hill here on NewsNation returns.
Tonight I will bring before the cabinet a plan for a ceasefire in Lebanon. The duration of the ceasefire depends on what happens in Lebanon. We have an understanding with the U.S. We are maintaining the right to continue our military operation if Hezbollah tries to attack us, if it rearms itself or rebuilds.
Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today announcing a ceasefire deal that will start in about 3 hours' time. The deal will end the fighting with Hezbollah in Lebanon and Israel nearly 14 months after the October 7th attacks. In an address in the Rose Garden here in Washington today, President Biden gave more details on the plan.
In the next 60 days, the Lebanese army and state security forces will deploy and take control of their own territory once again. Hezbollah terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon will not be allowed to be rebuilt. And over the next 60 days, Israel will gradually withdraw its remaining forces.
Back here at home, we could be getting a better look at what the Pentagon might look like in the next administration. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that President-elect Trump is eyeing 2 candidates for the number 2 job at the Department of Defense, and they both come from the world of finance. Joining me now, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, the congressman from the state of Washington, Adam Smith. Congressman, thanks for being back with us here on The Hill once again. Always appreciate talking to you.
Well, thanks for the chance. I appreciate it.
Of course. So this ceasefire deal between Israel and Lebanon, why do you think it came about now? And what does it still say about the barbarity of Hamas?
Well, I think, first of all, this is focused on Hezbollah, and I think it came about primarily because of how weakened Hezbollah has become and how the people in Lebanon realized that Hezbollah is not in their best interests. And Israel felt like they got what they've been looking for, frankly, since October 8th when Hezbollah started attacking them. They wanted a 10-mile buffer, and they wanted Hezbollah to not have the weapons aimed at them. I think this agreement puts them in a position to get those things, and it's a real opportunity for Lebanon to choose a different course, to move away from Hezbollah and get back to governing their country. So I hope that there will be international support, as has been said, for the Lebanese people to rebuild and pursue that alternative.
Right. And then obviously there's still the hostages, American hostages being held by Hamas, a deal with Hezbollah right now. Are you any more optimistic tonight that a deal with Hamas can come about?
Slightly, but not much. I mean, the Hezbollah situation was always significantly different than Hamas. But look, it shows that there has been movement. It shows in part that Israel's efforts to weaken Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran has put us in a better position, put them in a better position to negotiate a deal. I mean, the problem with Hamas is what's the alternative? Lebanon at least has Lebanese armed forces. There are some alternatives. I would really urge Israel to work with Saudi Arabia and Jordan and others to create an alternative to Hamas and also a legitimate Palestinian partner in the West Bank as well.
Let me read you a couple reactions here from your colleagues, both sides, or both two different chambers. Lindsey Graham earlier today saying, quote, he said, "Well done to all those involved in reaching this agreement. I appreciate the hard work of the Biden administration, supported by President Trump, to make this ceasefire a reality." And then Michael Waltz, who's the incoming national security advisor for the president-elect, says everyone is coming to the table because of President Trump. His resounding victory sent a clear message to the rest of the world that chaos won't be tolerated. What would you say to the two of them? Two different forms, but both of them mentioning President Trump. And do you think his presence as president-elect led to any of this today?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't think so. Like I said, I think what really led to it was Israel's, strong effort to weaken Hezbollah to the point where they just weren't strong enough to resist this, and that Lebanon saw a path forward other than with Hezbollah. So, it's hard to say what people's perceptions of something that hasn't yet happened, and that would be Trump, getting into the White House, had an effect on it. It would not be my focus. Now, President Trump's going to be in there January 20th, and let's hope he continues to move forward with peace in the Middle East and elsewhere. But, speculating on what impact that had, I don't think is the most important part of this right now.
So as I mentioned for our viewers here on NewsNation or those listening to us on SiriusXM, you're the top Democrat, the ranking member on the House Armed Services Committee. And I wonder, Congressman Smith, what you make of a report out of the Wall Street Journal today in which the president-elect is considering two businessmen, Stephen Feinberg, who's the CEO of Cerberus Capital Management, a private equity firm, and Trey Stevens, who is one of the partners over at Founders Fund, which invested in Anduril, which, as you know, is autonomous technologies involved with the military as well, that they could be the number two, basically finance folks or finance specialists in the Pentagon. And I ask you because there was a report out in the recent days about a failed audit for the 7th year in a row over at the Pentagon, which has an $800 billion plus budget. Is it time to put those with financial expertise in one of the top two spots over
I think it could absolutely be a positive. Now, the 7th failed audit thing sort of misses the point. The point is, for the last 10 years or so, we've been pushing the Pentagon to get to the point where they can have a full audit, and they are making progress. I mean, it was a nightmare the way the Pentagon was set up. So, yeah, putting a finance person in there to get us to the point where we can get that clean audit and also do a better job on procurement and acquisition. This is something that Mike Rogers, who's the chair of the Armed Services Committee, he and I work very closely together. We are hell-bent to improve the ability of the Pentagon to rapidly acquire the new technologies and particularly the software they need to get us in the best possible position to defend this country. Technology has become so important on drones, counter drones, bunch of different things. So, yeah, if a finance person can make us spend money more wisely, I think there are strong positives to that.
All right, Congressman Adam Smith, we'll leave it there. Hope you have a fantastic holiday, sir. Thanks for being with us this evening.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Meantime, another big announcement from the Biden administration today. With only 55 days left in office, the president is proposing the weight loss drug, Ozempic, covering more than 7 million Americans on Medicare and Medicaid. Now, the rule would expand access to anti-obesity medication like Ozempic. Our NewsNation correspondent Nancy Liu is outside a Walgreens pharmacy in Los Angeles with why this is happening now. Hello, Nancy.
Hello there, Blake. And, it's setting up a showdown because it's no secret how HHS nominee RFK Jr. feels about Ozempic and other weight loss drugs, which millions of Americans pay big bucks for out of pocket. Now, if he leads the HHS, RFK has indicated that he would work to limit access to Ozempic. That's quite the opposite of what the Biden administration is now proposing. And he's previously accused the drug maker of targeting Americans, selling to Americans because, quote, we're so stupid. Now, in recent testimony, RFK expressed that it'd be far cheaper and easier and healthier if Americans would just have dietary and behavioral changes. Take a listen.
For half the price of Ozempic, we could purchase regeneratively raised organic agriculture, or organic food for every American, 3 meals a day, and gym membership for every obese American.
Now, the Biden administration change of recognizing obesity as a disease, that could mean coverage for an additional 3.5 million Americans on Medicare and 4 million on Medicaid. And that change could cost the federal government a total of $36 billion over 10 years. So this change, Blake, would come with quite a price tag. Now, this proposal now has 60 days for a public comment period. And as you mentioned earlier, 55 more days in this administration, so this will kick it to the Trump administration. Blake?
Indeed it will. Nancy Liu, live for us this evening. Nancy, thank you. All right, full panel here with me now. Kurt Bardella, NewsNation contributor, Democratic strategist as well. David Avella is the chairman, founder of GoPac, a Republican organization. Samantha Dravis, former official in the Trump administration. Brad Howard is a Democratic strategist. Hello to you all. Thanks for being here. It's not quite Thanksgiving just yet, but food is top of mind at this point. You're laughing at me. This is interesting because you're going to have RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz. They think differently about this, and Joe Biden just dropped it right there for them to handle.
Yeah, well, I definitely think maybe Doge will have something to say about that $36 billion price tag on giving everybody Ozempic to treat obesity.
I mean, that's not going to be the answer for everything.
But I think, look, the question is, Ozempic is not a drug to deal with obesity. It's actually a diabetes drug that's being off-label use for obesity, and we don't know what the side effects of that will be years down the road. We're already hearing sort of stories about the unintended consequences of using this drug for this purpose, and so, look, I think the RFK philosophy of, there's more holistic ways to treat conditions like this is the right one.
On the political side, what do you think President Biden's and the administration's trying to do here?
Well, you understand why Biden's approval rating is in the toilet, because who is going to want to talk about weight loss when we're getting ready for the biggest eating day of the year here in 2 days? So tone deaf here of Biden. Look, let's say that Biden's trying to do good policy here and leave it for the next administration to make that decision. Here's the good news. You have a good discussion going on between what Dr. Oz is proposing and what he brings to the table and what RFK brings to the table with his view. And now you're going to have an actual discussion in the administration about what direction to go.
You know Bobby Kennedy. How do you think all this plays out?
I mean, Bobby feels very strongly that there are better ways to spend taxpayer dollars than giving a handout to a prescription drug, basically. That's his entire approach to his new job. Dr. Oz has done segments on his show where he literally took a cinder block, dropped around, spun around, and said, this is how much Ozempic, how much weight you can lose by taking Ozempic. So you have two very colorful personalities, charismatic personalities. They're going to be on opposite ends of this. We'll see how it plays out.
You thought something where we started this segment, or started this off, caught your attention, and that was Adam Smith and what he had to say. There was a lot of bipartisan.
I actually, if I'm the Trump administration, a light bulb just went off, because for a long time, Democrats in the Armed Services Committee have been pushing for this audit into the Pentagon spending because we want to track and get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, of which there is a lot in the Pentagon. And, Democrats want to steer more towards domestic spending, or what we call non-defense discretionary spending. But the Department of Government Efficiency is already proposing deep looks into the Pentagon spending and where the money is going and how are they spending it. And I think Democrats are like, yeah, we like that. And just to hear Ranking Member Adam Smith, who's a very serious, deliberate legislator, say that he's open to this conversation, I think you may see an alignment between, as we've talked about before, the far right kind of coming in with the Democratic priorities there.
All right, still to come here on The Hill. Do Democrats need their own version of Joe Rogan? That's what the popular podcaster is now discussing, but is he right? If they want to win back voters, what he had to say today on the other side of the break.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
You're right, Cuomo, and that hurts me to say.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
I took notes, Cuomo, for you.
Tonight at 8/7 Central, only on NewsNation.
Back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So what should Democrats do if they want to take back the White House? Well, the Washington Post editorial board offers this advice. The first step for Democrats, fix your own states. Writing, quote, we suggest that the best place to start is in the very states that are losing population. Ideally, Democrats could point to the states where they control government and their largest cities as demonstration projects that show Democratic policies could work for the nation. At the moment, they are not. Brad, you told me the other day that this is a very real thing, that folks are saying, look at what's going on at the major Democratic cities, and if that's what's happening there, why do you deserve to run the country?
Yeah, it was a criticism of President Trump. I think he did effectively. I think a lot of voters we saw in the messaging and the focus groups and the exit polling afterwards were asking, if you can't handle running a city, why should you handle running the nation? And you saw like really progressive policies get rejected in places like San Francisco. Progressive politicians get ousted in San Francisco. And when you look at who's going to lead the party next for DNC chair, you look at like Rahm Emanuel. I think that's part of his Achilles heel here. As former mayor of Chicago, not a great story to tell there.
So the folks some of the major advisors who ran Kamala Harris's campaign did a podcast today, lengthy podcast. And here was one of their sort of diagnoses of what happened.
She also felt that she was part of the administration. And unless we said something like, well, I would have handled the border completely differently, we were never going to satisfy anybody.
Kurt, I saw that and I was like, what? What did they just say there?
Yeah.
Could have tried.
Like we had a Democratic congressman on the border in this show 20 minutes ago who was like, yeah, you guys, we need to start figuring it out and start talking like us border Democrats.
Right, because what they ended up doing was satisfying nobody, so that didn't really work out too well. We were saying in the break, I was talking to about 50, 60 college kids the other day, and the one thing that they said, which surprised me, was where Kamala Harris lost them was when she was unable to distinguish herself from Joe Biden.
Okay. Meantime, so then there's Joe Rogan, right? He's got the Joe Rogan Experience, largest podcast in the country. Here's what he said today, sitting down with Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz.
I'm sure they're scrambling to try to create their own version of this show. Right. This is one thing that keeps coming up, like we need our own Joe Rogan. Right. But they had me.
Well, number one, they had you. Number one, they had you. They had you and they drove you away. Is that number one? But they also have, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN.
Right, but that doesn't work anymore. That's like you're using smoke signals and everybody else has a cell phone.
I think Democrats drove Elon away. They drove Rogan away. And what he says there about the establishment media on the left and people are seeing through it, I think most Americans see that.
Yeah, well, I mean, she didn't do particularly well in the establishment media either. As we pointed out, she couldn't name a single thing that she would do differently than Joe Biden. But these other mediums are reaching millions of voters. They're known for their authenticity and candor and sort of nothing's off the table. And I think Kamala Harris just didn't want to be part of that format, and it really hurt her.
It's interesting to hear this discussion of the Democrats in that somehow they believe that Trump looked cooler, that he ate McDonald's, that he was on construction sites, and that he was cooler than the vice president. Wait, they had Oprah, James Taylor. I mean, go down the celebrity list. They're suggesting that what's wrong with the party is they weren't cool enough.
No,
when the reality
that's not what we're suggesting.
The reality is the message was wrong.
What do you
and they can say the Democratic governors should lead. Guess what? Folks are leaving Democratic states. Migration, and the Washington Post op-ed talked about that.
Let me work Kurt in here because you were also scoffing. You were sort of aghast there when Rogan said what he did. I think, did you agree with him? Or?
Yeah, here's the thing. We have seen over the last 8 years the MAGA media do a brilliant job of constructing an ecosystem that feeds directly to their viewers, to their audience, to their base. Democrats have done nothing to offset. They've whined about the media. They've called it misinformation. They have complained and bellyached. They had $1 billion in this campaign. Not $1 was spent building that ecosystem that can compete with the Charlie Kirks, the Ben Shapiros, the Tucker Carlsons, the Joe Rogans. That's where people are getting information.
What about what Mark Andreessen says there, though, which is the American public saw in this election where much of the media was, and now they understand what was happening?
We'll see if they understand what's happening. I have seen no evidence from the Democratic Party that they've gotten the memo that they need to build their own content ecosystems. It's the same way that back in the 90s and early 2000s, Republicans had a huge advantage because of talk radio. Democrats never built anything to compete with that either.
I'll say real quick, it wasn't about cool. I think what Democrats were trying to do was trying to find cultural validators to bring people back into the fold. And I think what the mistake was they chose people that were very much establishment figures. And again, was part of the status quo. And again, when we talked about defending democracy, voters heard defending the status quo. Trump had all these disruptors, cultural disruptors on his campaign. And he didn't put on a hat and look cool. He put on the hat and he looked people are like, okay, this guy's at least trying to relate to me. What is she doing? And I think it wasn't necessarily a cool factor. It was a relatable factor.
I think it was a policy factor. You know, that old conventional wisdom about it's about who you want to have a beer with. I think that's out the window. I think it's about policy.
Voters voted for our policies when they're on the ballot in states across the country.
Your policies were on the ballot, and they resoundingly rejected them.
Without our brand, they were. It was a brand issue. Policies were on point.
I'll give you the last word here. Samantha.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was about personality. She tried to campaign on vibes. People were not feeling the vibes. They looked at which policies made their quality of life better. That's why
Trump's up there with Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock.
voting with their feet.
By the way, one of the things that they said on the podcast was they basically couldn't fit Kamala Harris's schedule into Joe Rogan. That they wanted to do it.
Well, Joe Rogan demanded they come to Texas, and she's like, "I'm busy."
And Trump did it, and Trump sort of beat him to it by getting there. But at the end of the day, like, if you want to make it happen, you make it happen. Right? Like
you got. I think the problem with a lot of Democratic politicians is we're too afraid of saying stuff or going on in programs that may offend somebody. We've got to get past that. We've got to be bold in our vision and bold in our approach, and we've got to win.
By the way, speaking of bold in vision and bold in approach, you think we should buy Greenland? Other side of the break. You laugh. What? Did you see?
How much?
How much is it going for?
They laughed when we bought Alaska. Turns out that worked out well.
Yeah. Story out today. Bringing the idea up again. Leland Vittert. I got their attention, huh? Leland Vittert, host of On Balance, Other Side of the Break. NewsNation, why are we showing you pictures of Greenland? Well, when Secretary of State William Seward bought Alaska from Russia in 1867, it was called Seward's Folly. Is Greenland going to be Donald Trump's folly? Perhaps not. An op-ed in the Wall Street Journal suggests that President-elect Trump should buy Greenland. He had floated the idea in his first term, and here's what our Mick Mulvaney had to say.
The Arctic is going to continue to play a bigger and bigger role in international geopolitics, and having another toehold there via Greenland would be fantastic for the United States, and it would keep China out of the region.
Host of On Balance, Leland Vittert, joins me live. Leland, hello. Mick also said it's kind of a Trump thing. If you see a piece of property that's valuable, go for it.
I once heard in the Mighty Ducks, remember that movie?